Hi everyone, this is Matt, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk to you a bit about parenting your supervisor. So you see, I used to be a PhD supervisor, I used to be supervised as well. So the way I think about supervisors is that they're a bit like little excitable, very excitable children or puppies, whatever you prefer. So they see something shiny, meaning exciting new technique or some really cool findings published, last week or literally just yesterday, and then they call you to your office, they tell you all about it, and they want you to do it now, as soon as possible. And this is just something that is really stressful, and it used to stress me out, and I always felt like everything was a priority and I had to do it immediately because my supervisor was excited and was really passionate and really wanted me to do something, which is fair enough. However, the longer you don't work in a lab, and I experienced this myself, the more detached you become with how much time it actually takes to do experiments. And it's not only the time that it takes, but also to optimize, and obviously things will go wrong, you will need extra time, so that's really important to remember. And also remember that because they have so much experience on us, right, so many more years of experience than we have, it takes them much less time to get from point A to point B, and they use less energy as well. So you might reach mental fatigue and just burn out by doing a certain task within a day, and they will be still okay, they will still be able to do something else and will have some time left. So that's something that supervisors forget. And also remember, the most recent memory of them working in a lab and how much time things were taking was from when they were very experienced postdocs, right? Just before they became principal investigators. So this is also skewing the perspective of how much time it might take a PhD student or a fresh postdoc to do an experiment. So it's really important to manage their expectations, literally to parent your supervisor, to bring them down to earth. So when I was a PhD student and then later postdoc, and the way I used to do this, which I think was very, very useful, was by creating a list of all the experiments that I was supposed to do. And I literally just had it in my notebook, always with me. So whenever my supervisor called me to a meeting, right, and it could have been, even we had a meeting yesterday, but now he wants to meet me again, right? But I have this list with me of all the experiments that I'm supposed to do. And I'd go to his office, he would tell me that, oh Matt, you really need to do this. And I would say, yeah, of course, no problem. Sounds very cool, very exciting, definitely let's do this. And then I would pull out my magic list, I would scribble down, the item number 25 on the list that I'm supposed to do, and then I would show him the list and tell him, look, as per our last meeting, these 4 items here, maybe item number 1, 2, 5 and 6 are our top priorities, and this is what I'm focusing on this week and next week, and I don't really have time for anything else right now. However, if you want me to do this, I'm very happy to do this, but can we put it on the priority list? So do you want me to do it this week? If so, then I need to create some space, some time for this. So which experiment do you think I can skip and do later, right? And by showing this to them in such a way that you're willing to do the experiment, you're also excited and passionate, it's a really good thing. But also you have that very mature priority list, and based on this, they will have to decide whether it's worth pursuing this experiment or not, and when would be the best time to do it. And I think the list just speaks volumes for itself, and it takes pressure off you to explain to them that I'm sorry, I can't do this experiment this week, because the moment they will see the list, how long the list is, they will realize that something needs to go, at least for now. So definitely do this. And you know, when I had this list, I can definitely assure you that in my case, 80% of these spontaneous random ideas went immediately down the bin once my supervisor saw the list. Because it was like, oh, okay, yeah, you already have quite a lot on your plate, and this is actually more important than this new thing, this new tangent we want to go on. So, in this way, 80% of the new spontaneous tasks went down the bin, and the remaining ones stayed on the list. But then, you know, something else had to go, and that was okay, because I still was able to manage everything in time, because I didn't have just an extra experiment to do this week. I had the same amount of experiments to do this week because something else was postponed by a week or 2 weeks, whatever. So you need to manage expectations of your supervisor in this way, and it works very well. I would definitely recommend it. So always keep a list of things to do, and you know, when you manage expectations of your supervisor, right, you also need to learn how to manage your own expectations of what you can do. And you can look at an experiment and say, okay, this is going to take me 3 days, which is you know, standard time to do this experiment. Absolutely fine. However, what you need to take into account that something else will happen. You know, that you will need a break. You'll get distracted. You know, someone else will come, ask you questions. You will lose time. So, I think the realistic assumption is that you are going to work at 70% of your efficiency, which means that if you have 8 hours in a day, you will only spend 70% of these 8 hours actually working on your projects, and the rest will be devoted to something else. Breaks, your lunch, you know, randomly talking to people, randomly helping people, and so on, whatever it is. But I think you will only at most use 70% of your time for actual work. So if you assume that an experiment might take you 3 days, then it's worth adding 1 day extra on top of that, right? 30% extra. And I think in this way you will always have that extra buffer, and you will feel less stressed. So you will manage your supervisor's expectations by telling them actually a realistic timeline, and also you will manage your own expectations of how much time it is actually going to take you to finish an experiment, which I think is really key. You need to manage your expectations and their expectations. The other thing to do is to actually have a time limit, the maximum time limit for optimizing your experiments. And unfortunately, I learned this the very hard way. So I come from a biology background, and during my PhD and postdoc years, there was this one experiment that I was trying to do, right? It was for my paper. I really wanted to do this experiment. I thought it was key, absolutely key to my story, right? To my research story. And I swear I repeated this experiment 34 times to get a black and white yes or no result. Okay, 34 times, which was actually 34 weeks. Every run of this experiment took a week. And on the most crucial day of the experiment, I was in the lab for 10 hours. Okay, 34 weeks, week after week. And on every, I think it was Thursday, I was there for 10 hours, right? And it was physically draining, it was mentally draining, and I kept getting a grey result. It was never a nice, clear yes or no result. So I kept optimizing this experiment until I finally got the right conditions. Okay, I changed the buffers, all the concentrations, the timings, everything, until I got a black and white result. And then I put this experiment in my paper. It went for the review, and reviewer number 2 said, you know what, I'm very happy with your paper, but I don't want this experiment to be in this paper. I think it is just a waste of space. It's not needed. And I removed this experiment. because there was no point fighting for this experiment at this point, because the moment I removed it, I would just have a paper published in a really good journal, and this is exactly what happened. So my really hard work for 34 weeks, and all the stress that went into it, all the effort that went into it, went down the bin. All of this was for nothing. So this was a really good way for me, and hard way for me to learn that if you have an experiment, at least in my field, in a biology, molecular biology field, I would, from then on, I used to spend at most 2 weeks to optimize an experiment. And if after 2 weeks I got a black and white result, right, awesome. If I didn't get anywhere, right, it wasn't even gray area, I didn't get anywhere from this experiment, then I would literally ditch it. After 2 weeks I would ditch an experiment if I wasn't getting any results, and then I would just move on to something else straight away. If I was getting, a wishy-washy result after 2 weeks, then I would spend another 2 weeks to optimize this experiment. And if after a month altogether I still didn't have a black and white result, then I would ditch this experiment and move on to something else, because your time is much more valuable, and also the reagents are expensive, but your time is much more valuable to not waste it on experiments that probably don't have much future, and you need to find a different way to prove or disprove your hypothesis, right? So don't get hung up on one experiment. Always have plan B, have alternatives. Spend 2 to 4 weeks at most on a single experiment and then move on. And also, when you're optimizing an experiment, do the same with your supervisor, that you tell them how it's going, but you already spent 2 weeks, this is the result, and you're going to spend another 2 weeks to optimize it. However, if you don't get a black and white result after a month altogether of optimizing this result, then you would like to change the strategy and prove or disprove this hypothesis in a different way, and this is how you're going to do it, and you come up with a suggestion here. So when you tell this to your supervisor, then they'll be very pleased, because remember, these are very busy people and they like being efficient. First of all, the fact that you want to that you're monitoring the time and you want to cut off experiments that are not getting you anywhere already shows that you're thinking of being efficient. Then the fact that you're coming up with a solution is great, because they're so busy, they have so many things to deal with, they don't really want to think for you about the solutions. They want you to be as independent as possible and come up with solutions. So even if your alternative experiment is not the best, they will appreciate that it's there, and then will give you, a better alternative. But either way, they will really appreciate the fact that you came up with something and not with empty hands. So remember, altogether, create priority lists, share them with your supervisor, always be positive about doing the experiments, show that positive attitude. But then when you optimize experiments, be very clear with your supervisor that we have a timeline here for 2 weeks or maybe 4 weeks, and then if this doesn't work, we need to move on, and you have a plan B. So this is the best way to parent your supervisor, to reduce the stress. This is one of the ways to reduce the stress of a PhD, and as you know, and I know, PhDs are very stressful, so I would definitely urge you to do the lists and talk to your supervisor about the expectations for experiments and so on. So if you benefit from this content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, because it keeps me motivated and it actually lets me know what you guys want to hear about, and I'll see you in the next one.